Voice of San Diego podcasts are sponsored by the Bob Nelson Charitable Fund, honoring the San Diego Harbor Police Foundation.
Hey, before we start the show, I just wanted to let you know about something we're doing at Voice San Diego right now. We're selling a print of one of the photos that Adriana Heldes took of recent protests. It was shared widely online. Thousands of people saw it and shared it. And they asked us if they could buy it, and we haven't had that for a while, and we decided to go ahead and try to make it available. It is a shot of a recent San Diego protest following the killing, of course, of George Floyd in Minneapolis. It's a powerful photo. Adriana did a great job with it, and you can buy it now at voiceofsandiego.org/buyprint. That's BUYPRINT, voiceofsandiego.org/buyprint. Half the proceeds will go to the San Diego Association of Black Journalists, and please consider that a nice piece of art and a way to help a great organization I've worked with for years. Again, that's voiceofsandiego.org/buyprint. Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. I'm joined, as always, by assistant editor Andrew Keats. Hello, Andy.
Scott, how are we, pal?
You know, life goes on. You get up. Sometimes it punches you in the face, and you get up and you walk on from where you land, you know? I'm also joined by managing editor Sarah Libby. Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
That was actually a line from Miranda July. She did a little short story in the New Yorker. So I don't want to take credit for it. Coming up on the show today, it turns out there is still a pandemic. The County of San Diego weeks ago set up triggers. The idea was that as the economy reopened, those triggers would, trigger action if something went awry, if the pandemic showed its head again as a threat. So far, those triggers, though, have not triggered anything. San Diego's mayor and police chief also made an announcement about how the police will do things differently, but you might want to have some context on whether that is different or not. And we talked last week about law enforcement on the Metropolitan transit system, particularly how many fare evasion tickets they were giving out and how much those hurt the people who got them. This week, we have a little bit of a history of how that came to be. And then finally, the zombie development known as Lilac Hills came alive again and has been crushed again. We'll talk about that project's history and what happened this week. But first, let's get into that public health crises. We still have the crisis of the economy. We have the crisis of public trust in institutions, of the future of things like schools. And we also have the actual virus still around. So the county has a triggers dashboard that's separate from the dashboard that actually tracks cases. I've been following it for a while. It has the 13 triggers on the site that they're tracking. Remember, our Will Huntsberry did an explanation of those triggers, but there are three main ones. The main ones are, number 2, the community outbreaks. They say there can't be more than 7 new outbreaks in a 7-day period. That has been more than that for the last almost week now. It's at 8 currently. An outbreak, of course, is something, 2 or 3 people get the virus from a gym or a bar or a social club, as they said. What is a social club, by the way, like Kiwanis or something? They kept saying so.
I mean, you definitely would want to list Kiwanis in like the primary ways. That's seems crazy to me, but okay.
No, that's like a service club. Okay, so what is a social club? Is that a bar? Is that I don't know.
Maybe they're collapsing.
Yeah. A club.
Oh, okay. The second one that they've been watching that they're trying to make sure is, of course, the supply of masks and other PPE. Did you guys ever hear PPE before this, by the way? That's
literally
a new
never.
thing.
No,
okay.
Never.
And
one
then
of the few
last
words
one
that we all immediately decided was definitely part of our vocabulary.
Yeah, PPE.
Right.
Just got to get the PPE for the office. Yeah. All right. And then the last one, of course, that they're paying attention to is ICU capacity. So basically, they just want to make sure there's room for you if you get really sick. And so it says if there's less than 20% availability of ICU beds, then we're in trouble. And right now it's at 36%. Okay, so PPE, we're fine. ICU capacity, we're fine. But that community outbreaks, they did cross and have maintained more outbreaks for almost the last week in a row. And when that first crossed over, they had a big press conference saying, this is a big deal. But that was it.
They announced that they would not be announcing any new openings that hadn't already been announced. That was the big action triggered by the big scary trigger.
Got it.
Yeah, I feel like what I didn't understand when this was all initially rolled out, that one of the actions it was possible to trigger is nothing.
And in fact, that would be the one. It seems
like the trigger comes with options of actions, and one of those actions is nothing.
It's like one of the toy guns. You pull the trigger, and a flag comes out and says "bang."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was now one of the triggers I've been interested in as I've looked at this every day is the number 6. It says increasing hospitalizations, and I was feeling good about the fact that was actually negative for a long time. For weeks, it had been -2, whatever, going down. Now that has crossed over to positive 2%. And so if that goes over 10, that would be one of those triggers. But we don't know if that's a real powerful trigger or just one of the flag triggers that says, trigger went off. I don't know. That
says,
we
you
joke,
better
but
be
this
careful.
is another...
I mean, if community outbreaks is one of the powerful triggers and that triggered nothing, then what would one of the lesser triggers result in?
The lower tier triggers?
The County of San Diego revealed their trigger regime to be about as powerful as a set of parents with a 16-year-old whose only punishment is grounding you. And eventually any high schooler will realize that if the punishment is being grounded and then you break being grounded, you'll just get grounded again, and that therefore there is no punishment and it's just all double secret probation. So after that trigger went off, we all got put on double secret probation.
Okay. Well,
it's scary. I mean, also, I gotta say, 14 the 14-day positive test average has to reach up. That means we would have to have steady, substantial increases for 2 weeks before that one counts as a trigger that's gone off.
Yeah, so just to explain, that's number 10. It says that you can't have greater than 8% of positive tests as a percent of total tests within a 14-day period. Some of these descriptions are mind-bending. The one that really gets me is number 12, contact tracing. Make first contact attempt for 70% or less of close contacts of new positive cases within 24 hours of identification. That's like I read that 17 times and I still don't understand. But we're good on that one. I do know that one. So yeah, the positive rate that you were just talking about, it says you can't have greater than 8% over 2 weeks. But for a while that was at 2%, 1%, 3%, and now it's spiked to 5%. And like you said, it would have to be a sustained, significant rise to ever flip that one. And by that point, it would seem like hospitalizations and other things caught up. I mean, the point is...
They could replace this dashboard with one that just says, hey, we're open now, dummies, and then a period at the end of that sentence, and just make it clear that they don't have the stomach to close it up again, and we're moving on from that whole part of things, and get comfortable with the consequences. I got to say, I am not assured by the way this has gone over the last week.
There was an attempt this week. The Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to ask the governor to complete the rest of the reopenings, to allow people to gather inside more, to do, fill churches, those kinds of things.
A vote they took on the day of record infections in the county.
Yeah, and they they said, but only if the public health officer is on board. And they asked her, and she's like, yeah, no, not on board.
Which is apparently another one of these triggers that just triggers a little flag.
Yeah. So I feel like you have some feelings here, Andy.
Well, look, if the rule is we're open now and we're done with it, fine. But don't prop up this whole big house of cards about like how seriously we're taking it. It's not.
I mean, isn't there a middle ground with the idea of like we're trying to protect hospital capacity, and as long as that main one is okay, then we are sort of communicating as a community that it's okay that there's that much suffering and that much death. It's just that's what we're going to live with as long as there's enough ability to take care of it.
Yeah, they didn't say that. They did not say that. If they want to say that, they could say that, but they didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to I'm not going to do their work for them of explaining what it is they're trying to do. But I will do our job and point out that the things that they're doing right now do not make any sense.
Yeah. Well, that is that's the status of triggers. I'm triggered. Andy's triggered by the triggering situation. I think what really triggers me is this the news out of places like Houston. You know Houston really well, Andy. The ICU units are filling up there. When you hear the governor of Texas, who was so on the liberate side of things for so long, and was really touting, we're going to open gyms, we're going to open everything, and to see him like clearly alarmed, it was a jarring sight. And yet again, he's not willing to actually do anything about it. It seems like, stop short of requiring masks, stuff like that. I mean, I'm coming down to like, do as much as you can outside. Big indoor activities are pretty much over until there's some sort of major treatment or herd immunity. And then wear a mask not just to protect yourself and protect other people, but also to communicate that you're on board with doing your best to contain it. As a way of communicating that you're confident in the community interacting with people, but you're also doing your part to try to contain it. But sure is hard to get that across, huh?
I mean, look, all I expect right now is some clarity. I don't need a 24 metrics. Just tell us what you're trying to do and what's going to happen when you can do it. Right now, I feel like the directions are pointing in the guidance is pointing in 5 different directions at once. And
also not just clarity about what you're trying to do, but I feel like everything is so muddled in as far as where things are actually at. Like all the various statistics that keep popping up, whether it's community outbreaks or percent positive, seem really, really bad. But the fact that there's nothing happening means maybe they're not bad, and it's just really hard to tell.
That's the thing. If some of these things that we're focusing on, like the jump to 5% positive test rate, or I think there were two straight days of 7% positive test rate, if that isn't that alarming to you, great. Get in front of a camera and explain why that's not that much of a cause for alarm. I would love to hear that explanation. But instead, it's like all of these things that we've been told are really important are going in the wrong direction. And our response to it is just to remind people to be careful that there's a pandemic out there. It's just like the shark is still in the water, but so make sure you have goggles on so you can see better.
What is more likely, A, that the Major League Baseball season completes at 60 games, or B, that they're going to begin that July 24th, or B, that schools stay open for physical campuses for the whole year?
More likely. Because, it seems like neither of those things are going to happen.
That's really hard to hear. I'm sorry.
Or maybe both of them will happen. I don't know. I guess like what we're learning right now is that once we decide to open things, that's that. So I guess maybe my official guess is both of them happen, and every man for themselves. Good luck.
Well, this week in one of the other crises facing our society, Mayor Kevin Faulconer and San Diego Police Chief David Nislight held a press conference this week to announce a new, as they called it, de-escalation policy to require police to use less force. They announced a second policy that would require officers to intervene and report when other officers use reasonable force. They made a big deal about this, called a really hasty press conference for it. They included keep your distance, be more communicative, consider using resources like psychiatric clinicians and others. But these announcements aren't necessarily new requirements for police, Sarah. It sounds like this is something they might have been required to do anyway.
Yeah, so we've talked so much about AB 392, the law written by Assemblywoman Shirley Weber that limits police use of force. One less understood or less publicized piece of that was that it came with a companion bill that kind of laid out how they were going to accomplish this. And essentially it was all about new requirements regarding training, and specifically training on de-escalation and communication. And so these are things, largely what the mayor and the police chief laid out. It's pretty confusing to those of us who have been following it closely because, state law says they are required to do these exact things. And so to have a big press conference announcing it as, it was painted as a pretty proactive measure that was done in response to, the community calls that have been happening over the last several weeks and months. But this is the law that they have to abide by.
Is there any communicative value in it though? Actually just, it's like when we were kind of picking on the president when he would come and, look at a fence and say, look, I built the wall, is there any value in just sort of letting them tout and communicate that this is now the way things are? Maybe they should have done more to sort of connect that to that they were required to, or the state law. But there is some value in saying this is now our approach officially, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's more just in the messaging where it certainly felt like it was being rolled out as this proactive step that they were doing in response to community concerns, and that, I think the implication is they should be sort of congratulated for that. But, every day when you drive under the speed limit or whatever, you don't have a press conference saying I went 24 miles an hour as required by law.
The one of the things you mentioned, Andy, was that this was one of the parts of that 8 Can't Wait campaign. Explain what you were talking about with that.
Yeah, so the Campaign Zero advocacy group has their 8 Can't Wait. They've all, it's become a very popular set of policy changes throughout the country. And I think when the city of San Diego announced their chokehold ban, it was acknowledged that was one of those as well. And so these two feature into that as well. And I'd need to check specifically how many of those 8 the city of San Diego has already adopted. They might have adopted all of them by now, but they didn't. It's not like they framed it around that at the time. And also, as Sarah says, it was already state law. So that's that's 8 policies from a national perspective. So if your state has already mandated some of them, it's a little bit strange to tout them as a local change or whatever.
Yeah, but it is still, when you step back from it, kind of startling to see them jumping aboard so many. I don't know. I mean, I guess they are clearly aware that there is much movement to make. Will it make an actual difference, though, in the trust in the community, and will it make a difference in in the trust in the institution and in the way people are treated? I think is the big question. And I don't know what we can say right now, but there's still a lot to be done to rebuild that trust or to build it from the start.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big difference between supporting policies like these in the abstract and ensuring that they're adhered to in really tough, hard moments, like when there's been an actual shooting of a person by a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also, to your point, Scott, one thing it shows is that clearly the mayor and police chief did not feel like they had handled the issue and it was past them. You know, they clearly felt like they still had to make a show of more changes, which is itself interesting because it means that all the pressure that they're under is still on them basically, and they're looking for ways to satisfy it. But I think to Sarah's point, all of this is going like the announcing the policy change is the easy part. The hard part comes when there's a specific instance of police brutality that maybe violates one of these issues, and do they act on it? Because there have been incidents with San Diego Police Department officers who did not follow training or did not follow adopted procedure, and they not only were they not charged with anything, they were not disciplined often, or as we reported one time, weren't even spoken to about it. Didn't even come up in their review that year.
The ways that we talked about those incidents publicly, whether you're reprimanding somebody officially, even just saying like, this was bad, this was not an ideal outcome, are not things that have ever happened. And so the mayor and the police chief, seem really eager to get out in front of these, like I said, when it's relatively abstract, but like we've had incidents of force in which, when the mayor spoke about it at all, it was pretty defensively of the police and pretty deferential to their processes and, the actions that they've taken.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the agencies that this reform movement has caught up with is the Metropolitan transit system. Covers obviously buses and trolleys for the city of San Diego and some East County cities and South Bay. We talked last week with Lisa Hauerstadt, who did a fantastic investigation examining what happened to just 1 week's worth of fare evasion tickets in June of 2019 and what happened to them now a year later. 80% of them were still unresolved, and the burden of the debt and the collection agencies on the people who could not resolve them or did not resolve them had become life-altering in a not good way. They continue to dig into that, and just on Thursday, Jesse Marks and Lisa Halverstadt did a piece examining how that came to be. And they led with a story I thought was really interesting from February 2017 when the police chief for the Metropolitan Transit System, Manny Guadarrama, he said that he made a big pitch to double the number of MTS code compliance officers with the express purpose of doing this exact enforcement effort to attack a 3% fare evasion rate. They had a 3% fare evasion rate that they were going to double the compliance officers to attack. And then the oversight that was present then, the board members, including 2 San Diego City Council members, they focused mostly on just how much it would cost. There was no idea of what this might actually do to people, or how it might change people's interaction with the transit system. A thing they rely on to get around the community.
Yeah, I was really glad to see this type of reporting because, like, a doubling of enforcement, like we reported previously, does not happen by accident. That is a proactive decision. That is a policy change that is enacted with purpose. And, just a little bit of history, like when New York City imposed broken windows theory into their police force, which has, given rise to a lot of the problems we've seen in the criminal justice movement. Turnstile hopping was one of the major broken windows theory crimes that they were cracking down on. So there's a lengthy history of enforcing exactly this type of crime, and doing so in a way that falls disproportionately on low-income people who use transit. In San Diego specifically, it's almost entirely low-income people who use transit. Well, that's too much, but it's disproportionately low-income people and minorities. And so that's a proactive decision that was made, and it really should have set off alarms for anybody on that board who's really interested in criminal justice, that increasing enforcement of turnstile hopping is broken windows theory policing in action. And if they support that, so be it. But for people to kind of just sit there and not ask any questions, or just ask questions about how much it was going to cost to implement, but not follow the line of reasoning through and ask about the other implications, is basically just not doing your job as an oversight board.
Yeah, and I think it was really smart the way they laid this out. And this was something I tried to question Council President Georgette Gomez about, as far as, some of the decisions that the council has been involved in with SDPD, in which they essentially sort of abdicated any sort of questioning or accountability work. And then we see it here again with MTS. And so I think, for people who are invested in this movement and following some of these demands for new policies, it's important to remember that it's not just the police who set these policies and carry them out, but they're answerable to all kinds of other government officials, and it's important to see how those government officials have been doing some of that work, or whether they've been doing it at all. And
just to be clear, Democrats too. Like, we're not talking about law and order Republicans or whatever. These are Democrats who made this decision.
Yeah,
or in part.
And like, concerns about MTS's enforcement at their stations is not new. We wrote a lengthy investigation on one, enforcement partnership that they had with the sheriffs, Operation Lemon Drop, and another about these sweeps that they do, where they have tremendous shows of force, dozens of officers, basically take over a station, storm the cars when they pull in, and do fare checks on every person all at once. We were writing about that in 2014. So this is 3 years after that. And, in that time period as well, there was a high-profile incident that we also reported on, where some of these very officers had beat up a MTS employee because he didn't have his work badge when he showed up for an early evening shift as a janitor. So the idea that enforcement wouldn't be at least somewhere on your mind. Maybe it's not front of mind. I think it should be front of mind, but you shouldn't be aware of the role that MTS's security team plays in basically law enforcement in the areas that area covers. As a board member is preposterous. You should be very aware of it, and you were being asked to ramp up enforcement. So I just think it's revealing that there were only 2 people who asked any questions at that board meeting when that decision was made, and the 2 people who did ask questions weren't asking questions about what was going to happen to the people who got these tickets, and how would they ensure that the punishment wasn't wildly disproportionate to the crime.
Well, check out their work, Jesse Marks and Lisa Halverstadt following. They've got a live one on this story, I think. It's at voiceofsandiego.org. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us.
I'm Adriana Heldes, and I'm a producer at Voice of San Diego. When I started working here at Voice, and whenever we hire a new reporter, we get a debrief of the entire region. It's a quick but useful explanation of some stuff most people in San Diego don't know about. Our CEO, Scott Lewis, walks us through things we need to know in order to follow all the in-depth reporting Voice of San Diego does, like how San Diego gets its water, how local government works, why there are different types of schools, and who decides major things that affects us as San Diegans. These things help us understand the bigger picture and the drama that's happening in San Diego every day. And then we realized that everyone else should know this stuff too. So we started a project called San Diego 101. It's a video series that explains it all. Our videos will help you understand how our region works, and you can watch all 5 episodes now at vosd.org/SD101. Again, that's vosd.org/ST101.
We've been following and investigating efforts to develop land near Valley Center for a long time now, and this is the project that's formerly known as the Lilac Hills Ranch. You might remember it from a few years ago on the ballot as, what was it, Measure B? I forget. Basically, the idea was there's agricultural land in all these parts of San Diego County. People go and they buy these swaths of land, put them together, and then they ask the county to turn them, not from zoning for agriculture or from low-density zoning, to let them build thousands of homes on that compiled bit of land, which makes that land a lot more valuable when that happens. And they tried to get that several years ago. They got almost to the County Board of Supervisors. We uncovered a conflict of interest that one of the board members had. Supervisor Bill Horn had a ranch nearby that would be impacted by this valuation. And they weren't able to get it to a vote. And they decided to go to a vote of people, and it was crushed there. I mean, just crushed. And then it came back, and I didn't even know it was really back, but it went to the County Board of Supervisors this week, and we checked in again. Maya Sri Krishnan, who did a lot of that investigative work several years ago, did a piece examining what was the major hurdle this time, which is that after several wildfires over the last few years, people are growing a little bit more worried about wildfires. And they said, this seems like a problem. Maybe we shouldn't build where there's going to be a lot of wildfires. And they listened. They didn't approve it. It was kind of fascinating.
Yeah, precisely. And there was like a very specific issue that they were ostensibly jockeying about, which was whether the developer would agree to acquire these easements at nearby property so that they could manage the brush there to try to mitigate the fire risk. I am a little bit skeptical, though, that even had that issue been able to be resolved, that the County Board of Supervisors was eager to greenlight 1,700 new homes in this semi-rural, high fire risk area in the foothills of Valley Center.
Yeah, it's amazing what a few catastrophic, unbelievably destructive, world-ending, apocalyptic wildfires will do to change people's mind about some of these issues.
Yeah. And now, so another issue that was specifically relevant here, which also had seemed to have increased salience because of the fire at Paradise, but it they didn't think they could evacuate all of the residents, 1,700 homes worth of residents, that they didn't think they'd be able to evacuate efficiently. That has been an issue with Lilac Hills from the beginning. And there has been a odd situation over the course of this development's proposed life, which is initially the county planners attempted to reject it when it was first approved back in 2009, arguing that it was plainly not consistent with the county's stated development goal of concentrating new housing in existing village areas. The developers appealed that decision to the Planning Commission. They won that appeal. The planning director, who was in charge when they had made that determination, left. The next planning department then recommended that the County Board of Supervisors approve the project, essentially saying that it was consistent in spirit with the county's plan, County of Villages plan. And it ended up not being able to go forward because of the recusal. Then the voters threw it out. And now it came back again, and this time the county planning department suggested that it should not be approved. So you've got the same project in three separate instances, ostensibly with the same planning department, although the director did change in one of those instances. And the planning department first said it was bad, then said it was good, then said it was bad again. Same project all across the board. and now it was finally thrown out.
There are 3 points that really stick out for me on this. One was the vote was 4-1. Diane Jacob, supervisor from the East County, voted against it, and Supervisor Kristen Gaspard voted against it. She's in an obviously tough re-election, probably thought a lot about it. I don't know if I should be surprised or not, but the only person to support the vote was Jim Desmond, who replaced Bill Horn. So I think a lot of people thought that when he replaced Bill Horn, he wouldn't have the same conflict of interest and would probably support it, but that one might put it over the edge. But correct me if I'm wrong, but Jacob and Gaspard weren't known as opposition to this before, were they?
Well, this is the first time Gaspard had been has voted on it.
Yeah.
So we don't know. Now she did attempt to send the measure back to the county planning staff for essentially more analysis that would have allowed it to potentially come back for another vote. That failed, and then when that failed, she voted against it. Diane Jacob, though, I don't know that surprised that many people. She has indicated a lack of willingness to support projects like this in the past.
The second thing that stood out for me was just how valuable this project must be for them to keep trying to do this, to have that agricultural land, and they must have purchased it. The profit valuation effort that they're going on must be so immense to keep trying like this. I think it just really puts in perspective I don't know what you call it, arbitrage or whatever sort of economic mechanism they're trying to pull off to make a lot of money making this development happen. And it probably indicates that it'll come back again. I mean, maybe they'll just keep trying because it's worth so much money.
Yeah. One thing that doesn't seem to be happening at all, though, is people actually looking to build the homes in the planned village areas that the county laid out in that original document like a decade ago.
Yeah, so you're talking about the general plan for the region, which has places where you can build it, but that land where you can build would obviously be more valuable, and so the arbitrage just isn't the same, it seems like. But this brings up the last point I wanted to bring up was other projects. We were talking about, 6 other of these types of amendments to the zoning of the region that were going forward. And does this indicate that those might be in trouble too, or just if they have similar sort of fire problems? Because another element that we haven't really discussed was some of the reporting Rivard did last year, revealing that insurance companies don't want to support a lot of these backcountry or rural developments or just homes. Even people who've lived there for a long time are having trouble getting insurance policies. And so I wonder if there is a tide turning against these kind of developments in general, or is this just one particular one that stands out?
Yeah, there's that. And then there's also the county lost its lawsuit. Appeal court ruled against it on its climate action plan, which allowed developers of these sprawl projects to mitigate their environmental impacts by buying credits, basically, that preserve forest areas basically all around the world in exchange for allowing them to develop these properties. Appeal court says that is not allowed, which I think maybe even more than the Lilac Hills vote is the thing that threatens a lot of these other projects that are still in the pipeline.
Well, another historic moment for, I mean, with all the crises and all the different things that are going on, it's hard to just wrap your mind around how big some of these decisions still are, and will have such defining impacts for the county going forward. So I guess we'll watch and see if it comes up again, and we'll do more reporting when it does. Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast, the most popular public affairs podcast in San Diego. Just saying it. Just straight up saying it. Every week, Andy and I put together a newsletter called The Politics Report. Comes out every Saturday morning. It's an insider's guide to politics in San Diego. It's really good, I think. I enjoy doing it every Friday. Should probably work on it earlier in the week, get more done. So I know it's not stressed on Fridays getting it done, but whatever, it's fine. Sarah Libby puts out her own Fire weekly newsletter. It's called What We Learned This Week. It's on Sunday. follow all of those and get them at vosd.org/newsletters. That's vosd.org/newsletters. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Editor-in-Chief. Andrew Keats is Assistant Editor. Sarah Libby's Managing Editor. And this show is expertly produced by Nate John. Have you noticed it sounds really good even though that we are all separate? That is not an easy thing to do, and we should all recognize Nate John's contribution to that. If you see him online or whatever, give him a thumbs up, give him a heart. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.